Good morning, vinyl community. I'm here with my Nick Schreck book, The Manson File. This chapter is really important. It's going to prove that Bernard Crowe was involved with all these people, which makes Manson innocent. On the horn of a dilemma. In fleshing out the details of Bernard Crowe's criminal activities in an earlier chapter, I mentioned that the afternoon of the day that they were killed, Sebring, out of town doing some unspecified business, called Fratowski at Cielo Drive and asked him to drive to his nearby residence on Easton Drive to pick up a woman whose discreet prose stylist in the LAPD Homicide Division later identified as Miss Suzanne with a Z Peterson, not to be confused with Lart Linkletter's crazy daughter or Rosemary LaBianca's daughter, who had been Jay Sebring's companion for the preceding night. So that was Sebring's date for the evening of the murders, and she never showed up. Miss Suzanne Peterson. Shortly after 3 in the afternoon, Fratowski called Peterson. She accomplished him on a brief and somewhat contentious visit to We Told K's art gallery on Wilshire Boulevard. Fratowski invited Kazanowski, that's his roommate, to drop by Roman's place that night. Suzanne, who browsed in a boutique while the Poles chatted, planned to be there as well. That night of the murder, she planned to be there. After a few other stops, including the Woodstock drive home, Fratowski shared with Kazanowski Sebring's latest conquest was let off at her apartment in West Hollywood. Lucky for Suzanne, she got so high that she conked out for hours after visiting another lover. When she woke at 11 p.m., she called Sebring's pad. The butler told her that Mr. J was out. As we know, Sebring was waiting on his date with the Grim Reaper by then. The apartment house Fratowski dropped off Sebring's final fling was on Horn Avenue. That is a really important address, Horn Avenue. That's where all these people work out of this building. I could not ascertain the exact address, but it's very short street, a thoroughfare populated with so many shady characters central to the Tex Watson crime spree that it casts an inordinately long shadow over this case. For after Charles Watson killed Sebring and hastily absconded from the scene with less drugs and loot than he hoped to nab, he didn't immediately drive back to the route at the Spahn Ranch in Chatsworth. Instead, although he just committed as high-profile a crime as it was possible to commit, he took a never-explained roundabout detour in the opposite direction. Tex pulled the old yellow Ford carrying this yellow kill crew into a gas station in West Hollywood to tank up on $2 of gas and wash away the blood in the restrooms. The gas station at the end of Horn Avenue, which places Watson, Krenwinkel, Atkins, and Kasabian in the same short street only hours after Fratowski brought Sebring's girlfriend to that very place. Charlie insinuated several times during our 2012 and 2015 conversation focused on revising this book that just as he had brought cash from the LaBiancas to the Straight Satans in Venice, the killing crew at Cielo also delivered some of us somewhat they never stole in unknown parties in the underworld right after the robbery went south. Could Tex have been obliged to pay off any one of the many criminals doing business from Horn Avenue in compensation from one of the earlier ripoff actions? No, I think they're all together. It's a little too weird that they'll be all working separately out of the same place. In consideration of who else was engaged in the skullduggery on Hoodlum headquarters Horn, meaning Horn Street, we cannot rule out the possibility. We know from later newspaper accounts of the later arrest that no one but two major professional criminal operations likely to have been working in tandem were located at two different units of the same apartment house on Horn Avenue. And both of these crooked enterprises were directly connected to drug dealers who already tangled with Watson, another connected to the narcotics traffic at Cielo Drive. The address of the building was 1211 Horn Avenue. If that address seems familiar, it's because the Minstrel chapter we explained that Bernard Crowe, the drug dealer who Charlie shot and left for dead in the early morning hours of July 1st, 1969, was arrested in March of 1970 in the den of iniquity housed in that dwelling. In other words, Bernard was doing his business at 1211 Horn Drive. Lots of Papa would not be reluctantly forced by Bugliosi to testify at the Take La Bianca trials until the conviction phase in January 71. So journalists hungry for every thrilling morsel of cult leader madness didn't yet know of his Manson connections when a brief news story reported that Crowe and his three Confederates were charged with operating a $250,000 burglary and forgery ring after the cops confiscated 100 stolen credit cards, a phony state seal for fake driver's licenses, bogus Social Security cards, and a counterfeit check writing machine found at the premises during the raid. The plot gets thicker. Three cooks arrested in June 1970 for their dirty work in a similar criminal enterprise, an airline ticket fraud ring, selling stolen tickets, operated from the same Horn Street address Crowe toiled from, was directly connected to Joel Rostau, who delivered drugs to Sebring at Cielo Drive on August 8, 69. Dennis A. Bloom and Jack R. Mirsky, arrested as part of the Horn scam, gave their address as 840 Larrabee Street, which just so happens to be exactly where Joel Rostau was living when unknown thieves supposedly broke into his apartment there in March of 69 to steal $23,000 worth of jewelry. Considering Rostau's track record, this may have well been an insurance scam. If criminal associates of Joel Rostau were up to similar kinds of no good in the same precise premises as Bernard Crowe, does this mean that the two of the key players in the series of Tex Watson crimes knew each other and were even partners in crime? Probably. If so, what would it mean that the girlfriend of Sebrings was deposited at the same street by Frykowski hours before this Cielo Drive atrocity? It means that they're all working together. And if this isn't enough to raise every red flag imaginable across the street from the place of business linked to Crowe and Rostau stands the Shoreham Towers, the apartment complex from which you will remember that the 20-year-old Diane Linkletter, falsely remembered as the 60s LSD problem child and poster child, plunged to her death on October 4th, 1969. She didn't jump to her death on LSD. She either fell, was pushed, or jumped. And you know what? They have the technology to tell the difference now, and they had it then. So they're lying, aren't they? Her live-in boyfriend at the time, although not present during her mysterious plummet from her kitchen window, was the drug dealer Harvey Dariff. Edward Durston, Dara's friend, was on hand with Linkletter in her sixth-floor apartment when she fell. Indeed, Durston may well have assisted her suicide with a neighborly push. Her possible relevance too, Carol Wayne, an actress who also died years later on a Mexican beach under suspicious circumstances while in the company of Durston, lived in the late 60s in an apartment house right next door to Joel Rostau, the drug dealer and crook who was then dating Jason Brings' receptionist and who delivered drugs to the Candyman shortly before he was murdered. Wayne was married to a business associate of drug dealer Sid Kaiser, and her sister was wed to David Wheeler, another dealer connected to the Cielo Drive narcotics ring. 2 months earlier, Dariff and Durston had been arrested in Benedict Canyon and charged with grand theft auto along with singer-songwriter Bobby Jameson, who appeared with Sebring and Beausoleil in the 1967 film Mondo Hollywood. Durston was named by the LAPD as an early suspect in the Cielo Drive murder. Although the police cleared him after a polygraph examination, the Second Tate homicide reporters report that Durston was connected to the three other hippies, all users of drugs and car thieves. Harvey F. Dariff, the boyfriend of Diana Linkletter, had not been eliminated as a suspect. Investigators feel Darif is a good suspect as some information has been received indicating he may have gone to the Cielo residence on the evening of 8/8/69 to possibly buy or sell some form of narcotics. Gene Gutowski told me that he confirmed that Harvey Darif was one of Fatowski's main drug business visitors on August 8th. Bobby Jameson is mentioned at the same homicide report, along with a James Stephen Williams, as in the Sunset Strip area and dealing in narcotics. Neither has been eliminated positively as suspects. Darif, Jameson, and Williams are prime candidates for being the three suspicious male hippies. Cielo Drive caretaker William Garretson, the pool boy, lived in the back, remember? Claimed gave him a ride to the red van from Sunset Trip to Polanski's house on the night of the murders. One of them warned their befuddled passenger that they wouldn't go back to Cielo Drive if they were him. That means they knew that this murder was pre-planned. The spiteful hippies were also threatened to mess with the parked cars of their friends in the Cielo driveway as a prank. Were there some sort of advanced team casing the joint on Watson's behalf, or were there independent players who had their own issues with, say, Bring and Frykowski, along with the suspicious sightings of the motorcycle and dune buggies speeding near Cielo Drive on late nights prior to the murders? Yet more indications that several parties anticipated some sort of violence at Cielo Drive before it happened. A blog post shortly before his death, Jameson explicitly denied having even the most tangential connection to the crimes at Cielo Drive. Though never proven, it has been suggested that Linkletter may have been one of the hippie chicks in the van. Even in the days after her death, speculation that Durston killed Linkletter to silence her about the information regarding the killings ran rife in the Hollywood drug scene. Such suspicion seems all the more likely when police confirmed in an October 1869 statement to the press that Diane Linkletter knew Abigail Folger and was probably an acquaintance of Sharon Tate. The cops also acknowledged that Ed Durston was a speaking acquaintance of Frykowski and can only wonder what these acquaintances spoke of. Trying to find my place here. Where did Durston and Jameson reside? Where do you think? 1211 Horn Avenue, of course. Finally, you will recall your earlier introduction to the elusive Eugene Gino Massaro, a violent pimp, drug dealer, burglar, jewel thief, extortionist, and all-around nice guy, identified by the FBI as Joel Rostau's partner in a number of crimes, including cocaine sales. Massaro is the most likely suspect in the murder of his associate Rostau. Though he repeatedly and understandably denied having anything to do with his fellow crook's brutal passage, I believe that he was also one of Tex Watson's drug connections. One detail in the FBI report on him is eye-opening when we consider the possible involvement of organized crime in the killings. Massaro is identified as an expert in the art of how to injure phone lines prior to burglary. Could this be related to the Tex Watson's purported climbing up the phone pole at the Cielo Drive to cut the wires? Other parallels between the Massaro general modus operandi and Watson's offering intriguing food for thought. As mentioned previously, Massaro faced a court charge for a Cielo-like lethal home invasion in which he attempted to steal cocaine from another dealer in '68. The lawyer was eventually got him acquitted, was none other than Paul Caruso. 1 year later, Caruso served as an attorney for Tommy Harrigan, the most likely to have been the MDA connection to Wojciech Fatowski the day of the murders. Most famously, Massaro's attorney, Caruso, was appointed due to Bugliosi's covert string-pulling machinations as Susan Atkins' legal representative. We will recall that Caruso was also recommended to Charlie Manson by Frankie Carbo back in the early 60s as the man to turn to should trouble prevail. While as yet no confirmed evidence has emerged to connect Massaro with the Tate LaBianca crimes that so resembled his own handiwork, His representation by a lawyer who also defended Carbo, Atkins, and Harrigan certainly adds to the suspicion that he was involved in some capacity. Considering Rostau's cocaine-related business with hairstylist Sebring and wig salesman Watson, it's also interesting that the FBI noted in one confidential report that Massaro claimed his profession was hairdresser. Watson's cryptically referred in Chapter 10 of his autobiography to a drug dealer operating under cover of a vending machine company. Massaro, as stated earlier, worked at a firm called Discomat, producing and distributing vending machines, selling top 10 music singles to its customers, one of the many rackets in which the mob mingled with the music business. Another Massaro connection to the mysterious of Cielo is that he was known to hang out at PJ's, a nightclub and notorious drug den owned by Elmer Valentine, the previously mentioned Whiskey A Go-Go owner with whom McQueen set off for Cielo Drive, meaning Steve McQueen, to visit their mutual friend Jay Sebring on the night of the murders. After 2008, Charlie consistently but obliquely impressed upon me the never fully explained understanding that some unnamed organized crime fingers benefited from Cielo, just as he directly named Frankie Carbo as the background player in Waverly. He stated that if he ever snitched of these anonymous mobsters' connections to the crimes while they were still alive, he would definitely have been killed in prison. Good reason to keep your mouth shut. We can see from Massaro's FBI report that in keeping with fairly standard procedure when keeping a malefactor under surveillance, the agents monitoring the subject allowed him to get away with several major crimes. Massaro's crime partner, Rostau, was under equally close observation as he carried out his celebrity drug dealing rounds and other financial chicanery. It is possible that the feds knew of Massaro's Rostau involvement in the crime at the Polanski residence, but suppressed that information. In order not to blow their operation, in April '67, the FBI, spying on Massaro's rich smorgasbord of criminal businesses, noted that the accomplice crook moved to Los Angeles from Florida. Talking about Massaro. His place of residence? You guessed it. 1211 Horn Avenue. That's the end of the chapter. I hope I proved that Bernard Crow was involved in this thing up to his ears. That's the end of this chapter. The next one is I made man, son, first violations, and the Costello Genovese connection. So we want to thank all our VC members, all our crime community members. Steve, still two subscriptions away from giving a record that apparently nobody wants anyway, because it proves the Beatles was a manufactured band.